Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rainbow United panel, which is part of Pride Cymru's virtual Big Week. My name is Vish. I'll be chairing this panel. So a bit about me. I work in mental health, and I'm the founder and chair of Glitter Cymru, which is a support group for LGBT plus ethnic minority people in Wales. The aim of the panel is to reflect on whether the LGBT plus community is united and supportive of its members as we'd like it to be. To get us thinking about this topic, I found a few concerning stats from Stonewall's recent research. It was found that 61% of Black LGBT plus people, 36% of trans people, and 26% of LGBT plus disabled people have experienced discrimination from within the community because of their identities. With that said, I'll try to get our panelists to talk about their personal experiences with the LGBT plus community and scene, including looking at what challenges and barriers they've faced. Then we'll move on towards looking at what good allyship looks like from within our community. We are immensely lucky to have 6 prominent, diverse voices of the LGBT plus community in Wales as panelists this evening. So let's start with introductions. So I'll pick on each of you, and perhaps you could tell me more about yourselves. How do you identify? What do you do? Who are you here to represent? Should we start with that, perhaps? So let me start with the person next to me. So Numair.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here and have this opportunity to actually have an interactive discussion with all of you. My name is Numair Masood. I identify as a gay man. I'm the treasurer of Glitter Cymru. I've already made a faux pas. I'm the treasurer of Glitter Cymru. I've known Vish for many, many years. I'm also a scientist at Cardiff University. I research infectious diseases in animals. I'm originally from Pakistan. I sought asylum when I was in the UK and I was successful, and now I'm classed as a refugee. So I'm hoping to bring an international experience to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Numair. Paul, you're next.
Okay, I'm Paul Davis. I'm a former Mr. Gay Wales and Mr. Gay Universe, and the first ever disabled representative to win as well. I'm from the Rhondda Valleys, and so I'm here for the mining folk. And I identify as a gay man. And also I'm disabled too, so I'm here representing not all, but hopefully I could be a nice voice to explain exactly what it's been like for disabled people within our community. So I'll be giving some anecdotes as well from people which have given me some stories. So
Can't wait, Paul. Thank you. Ellie.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I identify as bi or pan, and I run Bi Wales and the local Bi Cardiff and Bi Swansea groups. I've been doing that since we were set up in 2007, but I've been involved in the bi community for far longer than that through BiCon and the bi activist community in the UK, and linking together local groups in the UK as well. Me personally, I'm bi, but I'm also a woman, and I'm disabled as well. So I have a very intersectional identity on top of being a representative of Bi Wales.
Thank you, Ellie. Kate?
Hi, I'm Kate Hutchinson. I identify as pansexual trans woman. And probably many other things. I wear many hats, so I'm here probably representing Pride Cymru as their trans officer. Also, I work for an LGBT plus education charity called Diversity Role Models as their regional officer. So we go into schools and educate about difference and try and tackle the problem of homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying in the UK school system.
Thank you, Kate. And Isaac.
Hello, my name is Isaac Blake. I identify as a gay Romani gypsy. So I've lived on gypsy and travel sites for my childhood, and I run the Romani Cultural Arts Company, which is a charity. We're now celebrating our 11th birthday in September. So it works with gypsy, Roma and travellers on the local, national, international level. And when we started doing intersectionality work, looking at intersectionality with LGBT focus in relation to gypsy, Roma travellers, and the charity's been instrumental in the Roma LGBT movement in Europe and, of course, here in the UK. And back in 2019, the charity organised the first Gypsy Roma Traveller LGBTQI International Conference, which is wonderful. And the charities also gave evidence at the Home Office number 10 and the United Nations on LGBT intersectionality in relation to Gypsy, Roma and travellers.
Amazing. Thank you, Isaac. And I know we're expecting another panelist, so we'll welcome them a bit later. We're expecting Gavin. But for now, let's start with the icebreaker question. I want you to go back to your first contact and think about your first contact with the LGBT plus scene and the community. Tell me how it made you feel. Was it what you expected it to be? Who shall I pick on first? Paul.
I knew you'd do that. Well, it's going to have to go back to Queer as Folk, isn't it? Let's be fair. I think I was always aware that I was attracted to men. And my first experience was obviously watching Queer as Folk, and then after that, followed that was trying to sneak into Club X down in Cardiff and Exit and stuff. So, and you know, good old Gordon, who's now obviously running Mary's. He's always been there for us. So my first experience was very much a clubbing experience, you know, but also my first experience outside of that, let's go outside, was actually going to an amateur dramatics. And I was introduced to people that were potentially I associated with. And I was like, oh, these people are kind of like me. There was individuals there that were gay, and they were happy. And they were doing something they loved. They were expressing themselves on stage, either as themselves or as characters. And so that was my way of sort of thinking, oh, okay. So outside of that, in the valleys, the closest thing I got to was Celsig, which is the amateur dramatics. And that was the first time I ever felt part of something that was great. And I could see individuals that I could look up to and think, well, life does get better. You know, there was a couple within Celsig, a gay couple that I absolutely admired. So, you know, I was taking away from the whole clubbing scene. For me, it was actually going to an amateur dramatics and seeing it from another side, not, you know, alcohol fueled or anything like that. It was just somebody coming together. And there's, you know, back then there was nothing to do in the valleys. So for me, it was Celsig Amateur Dramatics, and it was actually a very wonderful experience as a gay man, really, for me so that I had these people that I could aspire to be, whether it was through performing or wanting that relationship that they had in front of me. It was a very positive initial experience. Obviously, the rest of the stories, I'm sure they're going to come out later on.
Well, I think that's lovely, Paul, that you got to see both sides at such a young age, isn't it? You know, you got to see through drama group, the community, the couple that you admired, and then at the same time you saw the typical
clubbing scene, essentially. Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll get to that.
Oh, we will.
Thank you, Ellie. What are your first experiences?
Mine are a bit strange because I didn't actually realise I was bi while I was at school, but I was always the person who stood up for lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people when there was homophobia, biphobia and transphobia, but I didn't realise it applied to me. So my first experience was hearing people slurring others and me saying, well, why would you do that to another human being? So I'd already educated myself. And then when I went to university, I realised, oh, hang on. Just because I still like men doesn't mean that I don't like women. In fact, I've always liked women and didn't realize it. And it was the openness of university that allowed me to do that. Then I found the LGBT plus society, but I found that society loved me being there, but wanted me to make up my mind and become a lesbian. So on the one hand, I felt it was great that I had other people that I could talk to, but there was certainly a certain proportion of that group that was telling me that I'm only really part of the group until I make up my mind and really become part of them as a lesbian. And obviously that would happen to me when I had my first relationship with a woman, which they assumed I hadn't had. So my first experience, in a way, I did feel that it was good that I'd found people. But on the other hand, I did feel a bit like an imposter as a bi person to begin with. And it took me a long time to realize that, no, that B is really there. It doesn't mean I'm only valid if I then end up in only relationships with women.
Sounds challenging. It sounds like you've been on a journey, Ellie, because you started off as an ally, standing up for other people. Then you joined the community eventually, and then you received biphobia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Numair, tell us about your first contacts with the LGBT scene or community.
So strictly speaking, my first experience of coming into contact with the LGBT plus community was an international one. It was back home in Karachi. Of course, I now consider Cardiff my home as well. But I was born in Karachi. So my first experience of interacting with the LGBT plus community was in a country where being a homosexual is a criminal offense, according to their penal code, and potentially, if you succumb to mob mentality, then death. So the circumstances under which I experienced the LGBT plus community was intense repression and a sense of fear. Even though I went to a fairly westernized school, I went to a private English school in Karachi, which is ironic. It was an interesting experience to me because I found it somewhat liberating. Which you may question, how could you find that liberating? But when all you've known is repression and conflict, just a slight glimpse of freedom is enough to make you feel special, to make you feel like this is great. When I felt real sadness was when I came to the UK and I experienced the other side of the LGBT plus scene, the sort of more Western lens of what it is to be LGBT plus. So my other introduction to the LGBT plus scene was here in the UK. And that's when I realized what I was missing out on. So I've had two introductions, in the East and the West. So I have this fairly broad perspective of what it is to be introduced to the LGBT plus scene. And it really is a matter of perspective. You can have multiple introductions because of intersectionality. You're never introduced just once. And I'm sure I'll be introduced again to another community, and I can't wait for that. So we'll have many, many introductions. Just looking forward to that.
Do you think that's tiring though, Numair? Like introducing yourself?
No, to me, that's the exciting thing. I mean, that's what I love about diversity. There's always a story to tell. Why would that be tiring? I mean, there's always something new to learn. The way I look at it is that if you have an opportunity to interact with a new story, it's a new experience. Why would I find that tiring? Sure, some people find it scary. They find this novel experience. But to me, I'm just like, that's so sad. It's almost pitiful that you find that scary. That's just exciting to me. Yes, it's a challenge, but you know what? So what? All the best things in life are challenging. And we just need to accept that. That is really exciting to me. So, there we are.
Thank you, Numair. Kate, what are your first experiences with the LGBT community and the scene?
Funnily enough, Numair, they're saying about a series of introductions, and I'm thinking about it. Yeah, pretty much the same sort of thing, I think, really. Because I can remember being first aware of my transness, to use the phrase, probably when I was 5 or 6 in a school playground. At that age, I had no language whatsoever, no points of reference. I just knew how I felt about myself. And then it was probably around the age of 9 or 10, and I saw a documentary on television about 1980-ish, something like that. And it was a trans woman called Julia Grant in a TV show called A Change of Sex. That was the title of the show. And it wasn't all very positive show. I mean, it was great that she was being empowered and she was following her path, but you saw all these obstacles that she faced. So for me to see that, I saw somebody who was like me and I thought, yay, I'm not, I've got a little bit of language and there are other people like me. But at the same time, it gave me a bit of negativity because I was afraid, because I saw the reaction she got. And then going on from there, I think it was things like seeing newspaper articles about the community, and they weren't all that positive. And then, again, the next introduction was probably where it started to get positive. So I think by my early 20s, I was identifying as bi. I wasn't out as trans, though, because I saw a lot more negativity as well. But then again, there was so much negativity to anyone who was bi as well. But I started to go out, clubbing in clubs around Liverpool, places like that, LGBT venues around there. And I think that's when I started to get the confidence and the positivity. And then it was these little steps forward, I think, from positivity when I eventually got to the point where I embraced all of my identity, transitioned, and here I am. So, yeah, it was those little steps to getting where I am.
Thank you, Kate. Isaac, tell us about your first experiences with the LGBT community.
Okay, well, my first experience was my aunt. My aunt is a lesbian woman, and she lived on the Shiny site in Cardiff. And she's from the gypsy community, and she met a lady from the settler community. We call them Gorgers because they're non-gypsy, Roma, or traveller. So the Gorger moved on the site with my aunt. So that was my first LGBT experience. And then just as a young man, going out in the gay scene in Cardiff and of course London. But it was very interesting going out in Cardiff. I was either one day I was a gypsy, one day I was a gay person, and I sort of had like two different identities, purely because there is a thing called anti-gypsyism. So anti-gypsyism is a form of discrimination towards Roma, which is anyone perceived to be gypsy. You don't have to be gypsy, but it's the hatred towards that particular group. So I already experienced anti-gypsyism growing up as a young man on the gypsy and traveller sites and going to school and experiencing horrific language I would not care to repeat. So I already had that image in my head. So when I went out in Cardiff, I was just Isaac. I didn't attach my ethnicity to it because I didn't know how it would be received. Years later, of course, I'm now charity director of the Romani Cultural Arts Company. So we're all about celebrating our ethnicity, and and we've also done quite a lot of work on intersectionality. And it's actually surprising when some of my Gorger friends found out that I was a gypsy. They've known me for 20 years. Their face has changed. And I go, but I'm still Isaac. I knew you 20 years ago. I'm now in my 40s. And so that was what happened to me recently. So that's my experience. So, both, positive and negative. But unfortunately, I'm from the community that's one of the most hated communities in the UK and across Europe. So it's a challenge.
Thank you, Isaac. It's interesting what you said about, moving to Cardiff and almost separating yourself from your Roma cultural background. It sounds like it was like a mode of survival. Is that what you're saying, Isaac?
I just knew the reactions that Gorgeous had towards gypsies, Roma, travellers. I mean, I think it's because there isn't enough education in the actual schools. And if you look at the Welsh Government enabling gypsy, Roma, traveller policy, in that policy, which is a major policy in Wales for gypsies and travellers, there's no mention of intersectionality. So my gayness and my gypsiness is captured within that document, but my gayness is not captured in that document. But I'm hoping to work with the Welsh Government to look at because so far that document's got aspirations as opposed to smart targets. So we need to have smart targets, and we need to talk about anti-gypsyism. We need to be talking about intersectionality. So I'm hoping that the next version of the document will actually be improving. But for me, I was, very straightforward. This is my gay life. This is my gypsy life, and they never really mixed. And when I walked through town with my gypsy friends from the Shinewton and Roverway sites, I had to plan my route around town. Thinking, if I go that way, I'm going to come across the gay bars, and I don't want to be rude to nobody, and I wouldn't walk past anybody. But then my gypsy friends say, well, how do you know those? So it's a challenge. But obviously, lately because we organised the first international conference back in 2019, and we did many events, I was asking my gypsy and Roma and traveller friends to come out as gay, and they did. And I thought, well, if they've got to come out, then I have to. So it was only 2019 I came out to my own community as LGBT, and which is wonderful. It's the weight off my shoulder. But I'm actually finding now people from my own community coming forward, in different ways, just to have a conversation, because there just is no support for gay travellers I use the word traveller as a broad term for gypsy Roma travellers in Wales. Really, there isn't. But I'm open with colleagues from Stonewall and Pride and Gleta Cymru and other colleagues. Maybe that can change.
Yeah, we're on this journey together, aren't we, Isaac? I think a big theme I've noticed from all of our panelists is intersectionality. The oppression we face is all dependent on the number of protected characteristics we may have, right? So perhaps we could talk more about that and how our multiple identities are perceived in the LGBT plus community. Paul, do you want to tell us more about that?
Starting with sort of how I was accepted or was not accepted as a gay man who was disabled.
Your barriers. Yeah, people's misconceptions.
Well, straight away, we were talking about how I went into performing. Let's take that for first start, regardless of my sexuality. Being born with one hand, I was born straight away into prejudice. My good old mum will probably speak up in the background now as she's cooking. I was brought up, when I was born, the nurse actually said straight away to my mum, she's like, oh, he's got one hand, and took me away straight away, leaving a 16-year-old young woman obviously worrying what's going on with her son. So straight away, that was the nurse, So dealing with that is been quite difficult in some ways. I'm a very, very positive and optimistic person. That comes from my having a beautiful family that have pushed me, and it's given me tough love as well. Don't get me wrong, it's not been easy. My mum has actually been absolutely vile at times, she's laughing in the background, making me do my shoelace, watching me crying, going, but I'm not always going to be here. You speak to anybody else, they would have said that was actually really horrible, and a lot of parents now would probably say that isn't good mothering. But I can tell you something, it's brought me up to be an absolutely fantastic person, and it's got me through my life. So I will disagree with them on that one. But then being a gay man as well, it's exactly, I'm just going back to the whole thing of coming out again. Coming out as a gay man, and then you go out clubbing, and you kind of, for me, naturally, I've got one hand. So living in the valleys, everybody knew I had one hand. It was just kind of the norm. Oh, what, you mean Stumpy? That's my nickname. Don't worry, nobody get offended. I said, yeah, that's me, Paul. And then all of a sudden, I had to come out as a gay man. And that was a huge step, and then you come out, you go clubbing, and you're with your friends, and all of a sudden you started seeing all these gay men looking at you and checking you out, or can I approach him? Can't I approach him? Or they'd actually discussed it straight away, and straight away they're projecting all their thoughts onto me, what I can achieve, what can I do? Can he do his shoelaces up? Can he drive a manual car? Is he going to struggle? Is he going to be able to do this? Yes, I can do tragedy pretty damn well. So you kind of, I'm constantly having to break down these barriers all the time. And go over to Numa, I've got to be honest, what you said earlier on was brilliant, because every day I have to break down a barrier for somebody. And do you know what? That is something that has been given to me. And a lot of people will say, oh, don't ask that person that. Or I was a redcoat in Butlins. Straight away, what was I doing? I was jumping on stage as a performer, breaking down a barrier because, performers don't have one hand, by the way. They're not large. They're not black. They're white. They're standard. They're basic. They're normal. Well, my job was to break that down. No, I will be the first ever one-handed redcoat. I will be on TV. I will be a representation for a child like me that's never seen me on TV. And that's what I was doing every day. And it is exciting. It is an adventure. And it's something that we have, and it's been granted to us to break those barriers down. Does it get boring being asked all the time, what did you do to your hand? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is boring telling them that that's what you get for biting your nails, But that's what we got given, whether it's talking about our sexuality, where we're from, our color, our race, or whatever. That's just, we've got this chance to make the difference in the world, and it really is. You just explained this so well earlier on. I've actually got goose pimples. It really is. It's an adventure every day, and I think those people that don't like doing it, then they've got a journey they have to go through themselves, and that's probably why they don't like doing it. And maybe it's not time for them yet. But it's been quite a hectic journey, and it has been brilliant. It has been great. I've had a lot of negativity, even becoming a Mr. Gay Wales and Gay Universe. The support was brilliant, but also very, very negative. But then I don't look at that. And that's because of my mum. She's built me up. So yeah, I know it doesn't really answer too much of your question, but being a gay man and having to out yourself every time and say, I've got one hand, by the way, it does get slightly boring. And I've had some really, really bad reactions. But those people aren't in my life, and they're only there for a quick second, and they don't really affect it very much. So, and that's kind of what I do every day. Break down barriers, make a difference, and like you said, it's an exciting adventure to make a difference. So.
Thank you, Paul. That sounds amazing. I love your energy and enthusiasm to break those barriers, isn't it? It does take a lot of momentum to do that, I think.
It really, really does. But having people like you guys, I've got to be honest, and speaking to people like you guys really does help as well. And hearing what everybody has to say also encourages other people as well to find that fight in themselves. So what you're doing right now will make a difference to somebody watching.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Kate, I just wanted to ask you a question about, the stat I mentioned earlier about trans people experiencing, a lot of discrimination within our community. What are your thoughts on that? Oh, I think you might be muted, Kate.
There we go. That's more like it. One incident actually came to mind when I was just listening. I remember being at a conference, and it was an LGBT-focused conference a few years back. And somebody there, we were just having a general conversation about why we were there, this, that, and the other. And it got to the terms around identity, and we were talking about that. I said, well, I'm bi and I'm trans. And this one person turned around at me and looked and said, oh, so you've got twice the issues and twice the problems then. And I'm like, I don't see it as a problem. It's just part of my identity. But, there have been times where I've been in situations and supposedly safe spaces where I've experienced transphobia or biphobia. Walking down, I can remember being in Manchester, walking down the street, in Canal Street in Manchester, and receiving, transphobic shouts from somebody sat outside a bar there. It's and that baffles me in a way, because it is that thing about we all suffer a lot of the same oppression. We do have those different elements to who we are, and the different things that we deal with, that sort of intersectionality, but we also suffered the same oppression and a lot of the same, not all of the same things, but a lot of the same shared experiences when it comes to that. I mean, that's always that thing about why we are LGBT and T, why we do keep together, because we're fighting against those same things, even though we have those differences between ourselves.
And it's interesting what you mentioned earlier as well, Kate, about representation. And, when you were growing up, you mentioned the show, The Change of Sex, and how you see representation, going forward, today. Do you feel, how do you think it's evolved?
It's changed massively in so many ways. I mean, you look back then, you had this odd one or two people they would put on a TV documentary. You would get a Sunday newspaper headline, and they were always negative. At the centre of the story, there was a person just trying to be themselves, but the papers generally lampooned them. In the late 90s, we had the character of Hayley Cropper then pop onto TV show. Okay, it was a cis actor at the time, but they did get support around that from trans people and organisations, and that was a little bit of positivity that started to get in there. Now we're in a time where we have got currently 2 trans actors playing trans roles in trans soaps on TV, which All About Trans had a lot to do with that, an organisation I do some work with who work around trying to improve media representation. So that's great, but then you look at the press, and the press is still there. I'm not even going to mention the certain...
I know.
Rhymes with fail. But there's certain newspapers that are still putting those very negative stories out there, and they're very inconsistent with it as well. But we are in a better place, but there's so much more needs to be done. And that's not just the trans community. I'm saying from the trans community, we still see terrible stereotypes of the whole LGBT community used generally. I see it in my work in schools constantly, everything from slang to terms that are used towards people. Yeah, it's still completely out there, ingrained in society. So we've still got a long way to go.
There's a lot of work to do, Kate.
Absolutely.
Ellie, Kate touched upon, I think Gavin's here. Hi, Gavin.
Hey.
Hi, Gavin. Welcome.
How are you doing? You okay?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Yay.
Hey, sorry I'm late, guys.
No problem.
Ding dong in the door is very good.
I was just in the middle of asking a question, Gavin. So I'll get to you just after I ask Ellie the question I have in mind, and then maybe you could do a little intro, perhaps. Yeah.
No problem at all.
Yeah. So Ellie, so Kate touched upon stereotyping and media representation. I can't help but feel that media representation really impacts the way we feel about other people within our community. Do you think that's causing the drift between the LGBT?
To a certain extent, I think certainly as a bi person who's also has an invisible impairment, so I'm invisibly disabled, I feel doubly non-existent in the world. So people talk about LGBT or LGBTQI or whatever acronym, but when they talk about things, they talk about homophobia and transphobia, or they talk about they came out as allegedly bi. Now, people don't often say they came out as allegedly gay these days, but they still use allegedly for bi, expecting them to, over time, not really be bi. So I think we're still facing that issue where there is so little, and even the statistics show that bi people, that same report you were talking about earlier shows that bi people do not feel part of the LGBT community as well and face discrimination within it. But equally, there's a lack of awareness. And until people start talking about biphobia, bi issues, bi people, and talking about it as part of LGBT as a whole, we're still right at that level where we're invisible and non-existent, which I think chimes more in terms of this still being invisible with the experiences of Black and minority ethnic and Gypsy Roma traveller LGBT people than it does with other minorities within our scene. But yeah, absolutely. If you look at them, then the portrayals we do have in the media, they tend to be over-sexualized. The bisexuality is all about who you're sleeping with. No, I'm bi 24 hours a day. I'm not just bi when I'm engaging in relationships or doing something. I feel invisible, and so a lot of people in the community say this when we're out, because we can't just be subtly bi, because everyone assumes if I'm holding hands with a man, I must be straight. If I'm holding hands with a woman, I must be a lesbian. If I'm holding hands with both, I'm either promiscuous or I'm assumed to be friends with both. So very much, it's almost you do have to be very, very vocal when continually coming out as bi. And then people wipe your identity the moment you're in a relationship. So, and the media portrays it that way. Well, they were bi for a few months and then they settled down. And that is not helpful, because someone who settles down may still be bi. They just happen to be in a relationship.
I think I agree with you, Ellie. I think the media does portray LGBT plus people in certain ways that, impact the way we think about people in our community. But yeah, thank you, Ellie. Isaac. Gavin. Let's have a little intro of you. So hi, Gavin.
Hey, how you doing, everyone?
Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so there's lots of sides to me, but I'm on here maybe to talk about being HIV positive in the community, and that being classed as a minority, if you like, and which has lots of stigma around it still. So yeah, I'm a singer performer, so I'm in the public eye in Wales and area surrounding, and I'm also a professional, an estate agent working again in the community and in Cardiff. So it's it's fire away if you've got questions. By all means. Sorry, I was late, by the way.
No problem. Better late than never, right? Thank you, Gavin. I'll get to you just after Isaac, I think. So okay. Isaac, I just wanted to touch upon the point of stereotyping. What are your thoughts on that, and how is your community stereotyped? I think you briefly mentioned it earlier, didn't you?
Yes, there are many documents you can download actually from Romani Gypsy and Traveller academics. So you've got papers by Dr. Adrian Marsh, Dr. Alex Marinov, who's a Bulgarian Roma, Dr. Ethel Brooks, from the United States. So there's many papers written about the stereotype, or the gypsy. So there are many. But for us at National Charity, we're all about breaking down those stereotypes. We've actually organised 6 international symposiums. So what that means, in a nutshell, academics around the world have came to Wales, and they are Gypsy Roma Traveller academics to support and educate and disseminate information. I know Helly's attended a couple of these symposiums in initial past. They literally are world class, which is great, and it's a privilege for me. I get to sit down, listen to my brothers and sisters present. And we've also got an arts program to produce new work and encourage a dialogue. So we commissioned a flag. It's a hybrid flag. It's got the rainbow colours with the Romani wheel. So looking at a dual identity. So that was produced by Daniel Baker. We've also teamed up with colleagues in Berlin for Queer Roma TV, so QRTV. So there is lots of information out there. And if people would like to find out more about Gypsy Roma Traveller LGBT, they can download a free report by the Romani Cultural Arts Company entitled Gypsy Roma Traveller LGBTQI International Conference 2019. And in there's a resource section to the report. So if you want to look at the queer gypsy essay, if you want to look at literature, academic scholarly work, there's a really good little resource in that. And there's also bios in to give a face to Gypsy Roma travellers, because people go, well, do you have gay gypsies? Of course you do, the same as any other community. And we also have trans Roma, workers too. We have wonderful diverse community. It's making sure that information is accessible. And I do send out to all the CBCs in Wales, and we do put on free international events that people can actually attend. We're hoping to work closely now with the Welsh Government. So the next step that they have at the Enabling Gypsy Roma Traveller policy, that they are talking about intersectionality, because my gayness is not reflected in that government document. So we are doing, as and we've only been going. We celebrated 10 year last year, so we're 11th year next month. So we're doing pretty good at the moment. And it's worth saying that the Romani Cultural Arts Company, they are Gypsy Roma Travellers on the board, Gypsy Roman Travellers workers, Gypsy Roman Travellers volunteers, and we have a vibrant LGBT Gypsy Roman Traveller team. So, we are here, there is a face, so if we can network and support you guys to get information out, I welcome any help.
That's amazing, Isaac. It sounds like you're out there, promoting your identities, aren't you? And breaking down those misconceptions, which I think is important, that education. So Gavin, we just talked about stereotypes here. So what have you experienced as someone, living with HIV and, engaging with the LGBT scene? Like, what kind of discrimination have you faced?
It's one thing that is when somebody asks me a question like that, I'll give you an example of a time where, I was using Grindr, for instance. And if people aren't aware of what Grindr is, it's a dating app or hookup app, whatever you wish to call it. And I'd be speaking to, you speak to people and, I'm an upfront and honest type of guy. So, I'm happy to disclose my status because I don't want to waste anyone's time. And the amount of times you just get blocked as soon as you even mention it. Now, you become thick-skinned to that and you learn to deal with it. Or I certainly did anyway. But then I remember meeting one guy. I didn't tell him. I met this one guy then and we had a lovely time. And I thought, you know what, is this going to go somewhere? So we speak on the phone by messenger. I decided to tell him before we met the second time. And he basically went off on one, saying that, how dare I even think of that, hoping that he was going to be acceptable to that. And just blew me out of the park. And at that point, it was like, you know what, enough is enough, right? If he's making me feel bad and I'm quite thick-skinned and I've got loads of confidence, if he's making me feel like that, how are other people feeling? And that's when I decided, I was going to go public with my story and I needed to get it out there and start talking about it to people, to try and help curb the stigma. And thankfully I do have a platform where I'm able to do it. I have I have a decent amount of followers on social media. When I'm on stage, in gay venues, non-gay venues, every opportunity I have to tell people that I'm living with HIV, I don't stand there and just say, look, I'm Gavin, by the way, I'm HIV. I'll put it into a context that they'll all be able to maybe relate to, and almost just to see that actually I'm living a healthy, normal life. And I wish people, and everyone would be able to accept that, and it was very, very hard at first, but now it just becomes a way. And I'm sure there's some people on the scene, for instance, if I get in one of the gay clubs or pubs, they go, well, here he goes again, he's going to mention it. Well, do you know what? That's what I want, because those people know that's what I'm there, as much as I'm there to perform and do my thing, I'm also raising awareness, and that has become almost my duty, if you like, for others, just to try and help. So yeah, it's the stigma can be, it's horrible, and it's a shame it's still there. I almost believe that the words or the letters HIV, we shouldn't be using HIV so much. We should be using the words that it stands for, which is the human immune virus. It sounds less offensive, it sounds less derogative, and I think if we use that, or if the whole thing was just rebranded, we wouldn't be in the situation that we still are. So yeah, it's tough out there for people that are newly diagnosed, but actually it's not as bad as what they think it's going to be. These days is much better.
What have you noticed over the past 10 years in regards to perception around HIV? I mean, do you think it's much better now, or do you think
it's a lot better? It is a lot better, but it's never going to be enough. It's we all want it to be a perfect world, and it's not. When you still hear of gay bashing going on, and that's still happening, and we're in 2020. So the whole HIV is behind being gay. That's way back in the line, if you like, but it has got better. But then I also think it's because I've been living with it for so long now. It's almost it didn't even come into my mind from a day-to-day basis. So for me to actually think about it and actually think about what other people are dealing with, I would say that is it doesn't happen to me very often. Sorry, I'm mumbling now.
No, not at all. You're making sense, Gavin. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on now, because I know we touched upon media representation with Kate and Ellie. I want to ask a quick question to Paul, actually, because how can we not mention being Mr. Gay Wales or Mr. Gay Universe? So why is that? Why was taking that platform so important to you?
Just like Gavin, it's a platform, isn't it? And I'm a performer myself. And like as I said to you, I've always wanted to be a performer, whether that was pretending I was Skeletor at my grand's, wearing her boots and being She-Ra, or being on stage in Celsig and then becoming a red coat at Butlins. And then what I realized was that whether it's my energy that I've got or whether it's the fact that I get a big gob like my mum, she's just gone, yeah, mum. I have something along with my stump or my disability and my gayness, that I have a platform that people for some reason want to listen to me, and I have a big enough mouth to fight for those that don't have a voice. And on stage, being able to be on that stage, and Gavin will agree with me here, to have the power to stand on that stage to make somebody laugh or cry is a very powerful thing to have. And in my world, I want to make it as happy as possible. I want people to believe in themselves, because we all struggle with that. There's enough hate out there within the media to make you hate each other, especially within our minority of a community, because let's remember, we are still a minority group. So for me, it was getting from doing Red Coat to doing TV shows to being represented in the Ranga Nation on BBC Two recently. It was always about what barrier can I break down, and what can I be for somebody, a child, which is the youth, which is our leaders of tomorrow. What can I break down? And so there's somebody at home watching me on TV going, oh my God, that's me. And that was it. And that's not even talking about being gay. That's talking about being blonde and Welsh. There's all these things. And one, I was doing an LGBT, I was a news anchor for Pink 60. And I realized how bad our community was up against, well, just across the world. And I was comparing what people were going up against, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And Mr. Gay Wales came up, and I thought, you know what? Nobody's gone for this. And there's no disabled there, no representation. There was some dodgy thing that was going with the Mr. Gay UK many, many years ago, hence why you don't hear about them. And I just thought, can I break down this barrier? It's a beauty pageant, but that year they wanted to go for people which had heart as well as a look. And I just thought, well, let's be fair. I'm pretty, my eyes are pretty standard, but I know I've got a heart of gold, and my beauty is my personality, and the thing I love the most is my stamp. And I'm going to see if I can break down that barrier. And that's what I did. I went for it, and I got it. And with that, just like any opportunity I get, I will go as far as I possibly can to do the best that I can. And from that, it just grew, from literally with Pride Cymru, who I absolutely adore. The first thing I did was like, right, I'm sticking you on everything that I do. You will be on my sash. The guys that were running Mr. Gay Wales weren't pretty happy because I changed my sash completely and put the Pride Cymru flag on there. And it wasn't about getting money or anything like that. It was about giving them representation. And from that, they thanked me by giving me a stage, essentially, at one point for Pride Cymru one year. And that for me was enough to be able to spread my message of love and loving who you are, and my whole message of never stop being you. And that could transcend everything from people. My main bullying that I've ever had in life is generally from adults now, because they're not sure of who they are. and they see me as a threat, essentially, or they're intimidated by just how much I actually do like who I am, warts and all, and I've accepted who I am. And a lot of people are still going through that now at the age of 40, 50, 60, 70. And they're the ones that are causing all the issues now, and I'm kind of like, oh, please, babe, grow up. But yet for me, it was a platform that was presented to me. I went for it and I made the most of it. And I'm sure Gavin could relate to that as somebody that's a performer as well. So, but yeah.
That's very inspiring, Paul. Thank you. So now I want to move on to, we talked a lot about breaking barriers and, misconceptions, but let's talk about allyship and how we can unite this rainbow. So we have about 5-10 minutes now. So I want to ask each of you, how do we unite this rainbow? What do we want? What qualities do we want from our allies within the community? Numair, what qualities do you want from an ally within our community? What do you need?
Well, strictly speaking, what one needs is limitless, really. So that's a simple answer. There are no limits to humanity's needs, and it has nothing to do with me being gay, me being brown. You could be the most basic and well-represented person, and your needs would be limited. But what I would like to do very quickly, before I attempt to answer this question, because I feel it is rather subjective, it's a good question, but it's a very subjective one, is what does it mean to be a minority? Minority over here, strictly speaking, simply refers to numbers, right? Okay, fine. The LGBT plus community will always be numerically a minority. However, if you really think about what is it that we're referring to, it's really just human beings, right? That's just what it is. Prick me and I'll bleed the same color as you. So really when we use such labels, or whether it's us or whether it's other people, we so attach ourselves to it that we don't really realize what the hell it is we're talking about. You're just talking about another human being. And the fact that we are so obsessed with labels, we have to admit we all are to some extent, is that's part of the problem, is we love living in boxes because they're comfortable, they're predictable. But you know what? Life isn't predictable. And we keep talking about adventures, we keep talking about journeys. To some extent, no matter how you choose to identify, there is going to be that level of unpredictability. And that's just one of those tough lessons in life we have to come to terms with. Now, I can understand that using labels, providing ourselves with that comfort zone does give us a sense of identity and belonging. But beyond that, we must accept that there is this humanity to us, that we're all fundamentally humans. And I think that sort of links to my answer. What I think we need from each other is to accept that labels will only get us so far. Ultimately, we just have to see each other as human. And we cannot cannibalize each other. We haven't spent, 60 plus years from the sort of birth of the Stonewall Rights to now to fight for freedom only to create new labels. And so I think we have to remember, what is it that we're really fighting for? What is it that we want from each other? If we just tear all of those labels apart, it's just, we want to be accepted, we want to love and be loved. And if that's the case, then that's as painfully human as it can be. Of course, I could have answered this question by saying what we want from each other is acceptance, to be a good listener. But I think what I'd like to end with by saying is what we really also need from each other and globally, what I'd like to see more is being okay with pushing yourselves outside your comfort zone. If your comfort zone is this little box, you have to find a way to push yourself out of that comfort zone. Because you know what? Let's just use a sort of Lady Gaga-esque philosophy over here, that we were born a certain way, yeah? Let's just say that, okay, strictly speaking, we're born a blank slate, but let's just say we were all born in this beautifulized, crystallized form. That comes with certain privileges. The privileges being that we all experience being uncomfortable. We know what that's like. All of us over here on this panel know what it's like to be uncomfortable. And I think we need to teach other people how to do that. Most of the problems arise from people not wanting to move out of those boxes, out of their comfort zones. And all of us over here have that unique ability to do that. So let's use our voices in that respect.
Thank you, Numair. That made me think. Kate, what do we need to unite this rainbow? I think you're muted, Kate.
Again. Okay. There's lots of things actually I can think of around good allyship. One good one I can think of is being the voice in the room that raises the voices of the people who are not there. You know, we're a wide community. Sometimes certain groups are underrepresented. So be that person who sticks up for those underrepresented voices when they're not in the room. And when they are in the room, maybe occasionally stepping back and trying to raise that person's voice, you know, trying to give that voice to others who, even when we're all in one big space, they still don't get heard. So it's also, I think, knowing when we need to step back so others can speak and we can give them that voice that they need. I think that's so important, and it doesn't happen enough.
I agree, Kate. It's like using our privilege, isn't it, to amplify their voice?
Absolutely. You know, myself, I'm a white trans woman, and I've got a huge amount of privilege, and I know that. And yeah, I do experience certain, you know, I've experienced horrible bits of oppression here and there, but also I'm aware that as far as thing goes, I'm in a very, very privileged position. And if I can sometimes use that privileged position to try and raise the voices of others, then that's something we've got to do. We need to have more compassion. We need to have more understanding. We need to have more empathy as a community within, you know, within our community.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kate. Thank you. Ellie, what is one thing that can unite our rainbow?
I would say it's about finding out what those unheard voices are. People are talking about intersectionality now and forgetting that the bi community is still not talked about. It's LGBT, use the bi. Talk about biphobia alongside homophobia and transphobia. But then also all shades of that. So bring in disability, race, all the different things that make up a human being as part of that. Represent us. Our colours are missing. So all the progress flags that are now bringing in the really important, and they are absolutely vital, race and ethnicity issues, are forgetting that there's a bi-pride flag. So we're still being overlooked. So almost cribbing from other movements, find us. And whether that's as bi people or any other minority or marginalized community here, find us, listen to us, amplify our voices, but equally fund us. We've been running for 13 years, and if every local authority in Wales gave £100, we would earn more in 1 year than we've earned in 13 years of it, than we've actually had coming in 13 years of existence. Because we're bi only, and making that argument of why biphobia is still an issue, people don't see that they need to fund our work. And it's a serious issue for marginalized communities, that the people who are that thing need to be funded to work on those issues and raise our own voices.
Absolutely, Ellie. Amazing. Thank you. Paul, what do you want? How do we unite this rainbow? One thing.
Oh, one thing. I think the people that are doing what they do are doing it very well. So whatever you do, don't stop. That's the main thing. And I'm just going to absolutely agree with what everybody's saying here. That's just not my way of coming out of it. It's just because you've all said it. It is actually pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, speaking to those individuals that are completely different to you or perceived different to you, and finding out a bit more about them. And for some reason, we seem to be putting up all these barriers ourselves as well, and just to protect ourselves. And it's like, going back to what Numair said, we've got to push ourselves out of them. What's the whole bloody point? Do you know what I mean? If my mum didn't make me do my bloody shoelaces up, and it was up to my gran, I would still be there, sitting there, trying to do my shoelaces up now, and she'd be doing it for me. So it's all these things of push yourself out of the comfort zones, accept it from people, and if you don't accept them, just keep walking. You don't have to talk to them. You know, it's a very short life we live it to the maximum, and just get on with people. You know, it's a very, very short life we've got here. Make the most of it, and if you don't, then you're a long time dead, dear.
Thank you, Paul. Isaac, how do we unite this rainbow?
We need to be able to listen, because I know that the government, local authorities and NGOs, non-governmental organisations will say they're willing to listen, but do they hear? Are they hearing what we're saying? I'm sure that all these agencies have a filing cabinet of recommendations for various different reports, but they need to do something with that knowledge. So we are giving them these international conferences, these world-class events, but actually, are they doing something from that event? Are they just coming for a photographic opportunity, or they're actually going to do something with the information? And of course, it also goes to quantifiable, viable data. There just isn't enough data on intersectionality. That's actually a new concept, even for the EHRC. You know, they are looking at that now. So we need to make sure that intersectionality is actually being picked up, and we are looking at the data gaps, because we need data gaps for quantifiable data, so we can get some funding for intervention for all of our communities. So my big message is, if they are listening, they need to do something with the information.
Thank you, Isaac. And finally, Gavin, what do we need to unite this rainbow?
I think it needs more people like ourselves. So well done, guys, for coming on and talking about your minority. I think it just needs more people like us to be inspirational to others in the same, you know, that are behind, like Kate was saying earlier, almost in our shadows at the moment, but, you know, encourage those people to unite and walk together, you know, and be proud of who you are. I walk down the street hand in hand with my other half, you know, through town, through anywhere. We walk hand in hand everywhere. And you know what? We are so comfortable with that now, and it's about almost shifting that uncomfortableness onto the people that are walking towards us and get them to see it. It's in their face, you know, and I want to get to a point where they're not even taking any notice. You know, at the moment, it's a bit of fun. You look at them and you can see them eyeing you up and go, oh my God, where do I look? You know, I want to be able to walk past them and know they're not turning around, checking us out again. You know, after all, LGBTQ lives matter.
Yay, that's an amazing way to end, Gavin. Thank you so much. Yeah, what an insightful panel this has been. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for being so informative. Here's to us keeping our rainbow community united by being better allies to one another. And yeah, thank you to everyone for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.